Right, I'll make a start. I'll do a little demo. We've got Rona starting today. So this is a very good, lots of people. So into October now, and it's a 5-week month. So I'm going to do the project for at least 4 of the weeks, and then maybe go into another one, another month. So this month's project is autumn, which you could interpret in any way you want, really, if you wanted to go along with the project. So some people are working on still lives, which is quite nice to see some sort of autumn themed still lives. Or it could be trees and things like that, but also it could be just things like the brent geese were all in this morning, and that's a very autumn thing for here. I also sort of think things like, well, I took a few photos this week, and they tended to be sort of slightly misty scenes. It's been nice and bright, but kind of autumn colours, going into autumn colours and slightly misty atmospheric scenes. So, however, whatever you sort of interpret autumn as, or however you want to interpret autumn, really. I thought for today, so these are the demos I've done this week. This was Tuesday, so I did half with one class and half the other class. And then that was a quick one I did this morning, which was based on that sort of thing. I thought I'd do something like this today, just because it's a little bit simpler. I won't go into all this. It'll be just a tree and maybe a little bit of this tree. And I'm going to use the oils, which are watercolour oils. So I've got a few photos that I've collected together on a kind of autumn theme here, if anybody wants any visual references. Right, so I'm going to, so normally, what's the pencil in there? So normally when I'm painting with oils, I tend to paint on some sort of colour or tone to start with. This one's a little bit too dark, so I tend to go a little bit more like that sort of tone. But I kind of play usual grey. And a lot of my work is, I work outside a lot, so that's how I tend to do it. I'll just show you something I did started yesterday. So this is, so I do a lot of these sort of sizes. And that sort of thing. So it started out as a kind of mid-grey. But I was thinking today, if anybody wants to try oils, what I've got is, it's acrylic painting paper, but it's a white. So I thought I'd just show, from, if you're working from white, how I go about it. I quite like to sketch, well, I either sketch out using the paint itself, which I don't seem to have out, let's go and find it, mate. So I tend to just have paint out in one of these plastic boxes and then mix it on one of these disposable palettes. I quite like using a pastel pencil to sketch out with, or I'll just thin the paint, just use thin paint. So I'll demonstrate a little bit of that. So it's thin paint. And I do kind of use both approaches, and it really just depends on what the subject is. If it's really complicated, I might start off with a pencil, but if it's something like this, I could probably just use a thinnish brush and just draw out the main shapes fairly easily with the paint itself. So that's one approach. And the nice thing about that is hopefully that will wash out. It washes out on the boards, but sometimes paper can be a bit absorbent. Yeah, so that's not washing out actually, because it's obviously absorbing this paper. On the boards it will wash out. So another alternative is a pastel pencil, and this will rub out and wipe out quite easily. Or I can just wash it out if it's in the wrong place. So with the tree, I don't need too much detail because I can draw in with the paint itself, so it's just getting a rough idea of the canopy shape, like that. You can pay a bit more attention than I am, and I quite like that tree in the background, and that provides a nice contrast with the tree trunk there. So that could be in there. I'm not going to worry about the street scene, or quite nice street scene, but I don't really want that. And that signpost is a bit too eye-catching. But that would be enough, so with a bit of landscape there. I then tend to work, if I can, background to foreground. So I'll probably start with some sky. And these are water mixable oils. So if you've not come across these, they're like a modified oil paint where you can wash your brushes with water and you can thin the paint a little bit with water. So these are for me for teaching. It's really nice and easy, and I can clean up very quickly. But they've got very similar properties to ordinary traditional oil paints. So starting out with the sky. To me, it's like a fairly warm colour. A bit more white out. So I'm going to make that just very slightly pinky. So a little tiny bit of yellow and a tiny bit of a crimsony red. That gets me a very pale. That's a bit too strong actually. It's basically white that I've just warmed up a little bit really. So I don't want too much colour in there. That's probably far too much. Just want a bit of that. So this isn't really going to show up that well actually on the white paper. If I was doing this on the grey, it would stand out. And part of the reason I like to work on toned boards is so that both the darks and the lights stand out immediately. But on this, I'll need to kind of get rid of most of the white before I can see how everything looks. One way you can work with oils is, I mean, that's the paint gone on, the strength that comes out the tube. I could just thin it with water and actually just do it almost like a wash. And I could do a whole, sort of wash over the whole thing, just with very, very thin paint, just like watercolour. And that could be an undercoat. And then the next layer could be just slightly thicker paint. So it might be quite a good way to work with this actually. If you're working on white, you could build your painting, rather than try and do it in one pass, you could build your painting up gradually with very thin paint. So that could be that pinky colour. Mix of green, again quite thin. And it doesn't need to be too precise, just needs to have a, just feel just roughly green. So some yellow and some blue. That's going to be a little bit too bright. A little bit of red in, I think, or orange. Yeah, that's a bit better. A little bit white because it's quite a pale colour. Again, I'll just quickly pop that in. The other thing is, if you've got acrylics, you could do this kind of underpainting very quickly with acrylics, and it dry within a few minutes, and then you could then have dry paint to work over the top of. So it's a bit like if you're painting, if you're painting a house, you're painting the door, you probably do an undercoat of, undercoat paint, and then paint your next layer over the top. So it's a way of, kind of blocking out all the white of the paper underneath to start with, and then this area is a little bit darker and a bit more, a bit more browny, rusty colours, autumn colours. A little bit of red, some yellow, and just a slightly stronger orangey colour, I think, for that. What I could do is look for these areas of light and dark. So I'll just thin that very little bit. But to be honest, you know, as long as you get some colour that's roughly going to work as an undercoat there, that would be absolutely fine. Pop that in very quickly. I think because this is acrylic paper, it is absorbing the paint a little bit anyway. So that could be undercoat. The tree itself, and if I wanted to go a little bit darker there, I could add a little bit of brown in with that. Just make that a bit darker. So there's some shadows. Yeah. And it starts to read as, I think as soon as you do that, it starts to read as light in some areas and other areas going into shadow. The tree trunk itself, I'll just pop it in the same tone for the time being. That, to start with, just gets rid of all the white paper. I can then start judging one tone against another tone. So it is a nice way to work. That's basically how I was taught to paint. I guess another approach would be just to do a light and dark, almost like a grey painting, you know, a grey underpainting. So you've got the tones and then you've got colour over the top. So either way would be fine. Once I'm there, I'll then just go the same process again. So with the background to foreground, that feels a little bit like it could go a bit lighter. So I'll go back to that mix and just add a little bit more white. And as I say, this is already soaked in and dried a bit. So that's lightening that up a bit. And this time, I'm not particularly thinning the paint. It's more or less out the tube. And a bit more colour out. And then the next bit would be this bit here. A bit of yellow. So yellow with, yeah, there's quite a few different colours in there. I want to keep that nice and white. And actually having some of that underpainting showing through might be quite a nice thing. Just sort of breaking that up a little bit. Let's go a tiny bit darker. Sort of green, slightly darker greens in there. Same around here. Perhaps some browns in there too. Keeping sort of similar tones. It's a bit too dark, a little bit more white. Like that. Then work a bit more up here. I guess the trunk might be the next bit to do. That's a slightly different brush. So some raw umber, that is, and a little bit of ultramarine blue, and that gets a nice dark colour. So it's almost like a black. So I get a nice strong dark colour in there. It's a bit brown. So one half of the tree is catching the light. Perhaps a little bit too dark. And then the areas that are catching a little bit of light, I'll lighten up a bit with a bit of white. So it keeps the same sort of colour, tiny bit of yellow added to it. Just painting a little bit of highlight. Like that. And then same sort of process for the canopy. go for the, with, what I do try and do is dark to light if I can. So any areas that are quite dark, I'll put those in first. So that is, to me, is a sort of slightly greeny, browny colour. So use some blue and some yellow, and a little bit of red. That's a bit more of a greeny tinge, a little bit more of the greeny blue. Yeah, tiny bit of white, that's a little bit dark. And the nice thing about the oils is you can do quite a lot of the drawing with the brush, and you can change things. If I want to scrape a bit back, I can do that. Or use the knife to break up the textures. This area is quite solid. The places where I notice sort of individual leaves are more kind of on the edge, really. So here, these sort of areas are more like bigger masses. So I might kind of paint a mass in like that. And then just break it up a little bit. Perhaps put some slightly lighter greens in just to do that. And then at the edges, I would, oops, pick the wrong colour up. Do a few dots and marks just with the tip of the brush. I'll do a few around here. And that's where I tend to notice, you know, individual leaves more. When you've got this, around this bit, I'm painting over wet paint, so it's a bit more difficult to then get the paint to stick. So that first layer, you can always let all that dry, or let your background dry, and then gradually work forward. So it depends how quickly you work. But because I work quite quickly at times, it's just a sort of light touch, just to kind of mix plenty of paint, and pop a bit on the tip of the brush. You can just kind of touch that in like that. And then if I'm picking up paint off of the painting, I just give it a quick wipe before I pick up paint from the palette again. So I find that helps. And then the lighter areas, I'll just add some more yellow to that. Just to go a bit more orangey. Red. Some of these sort of kind of mid-tone colours. Again, quite nice sometimes to have some of the underpainting shown through. A bit like that. And then some that are even brighter still. So perhaps add a little bit of white towards the end to the mix. Lighter. It's probably a bit too green. It's a bit more yellow than that. Just the light catching individual leaves here and there. And this is using the paint sort of out of the tube really. I'm not particularly thinning it now. So that's really the process that I tend to go through, or that can be quite a good way to start. If anybody fancies having a go at this, I've got plenty of these. You know, you can have some of these. I've got some of these spare disposable palettes and a few brushes here. I've got more of the acrylic paper. And there's also various sort of reference photos, roughly themed around autumn, if anybody wants to use photos. Is that all right? Anybody want to ask me?
Yes.
Good to go? Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay, all right. Yeah, yeah. You use yours as well, okay. Yeah. Yeah.
to dry.
Yeah. They take the same time to dry. They're not fast drying. But that bit where I just, because it's on hand trail, that first wash, it absorbs it. So I think that would feel quite dry. Yeah, that's stuck on there pretty much.
Yeah, that's the thing, I would like to dry them, it's a weeding and then a weeding.
Yeah, yeah. So this one I was working on yesterday. I used to fast dry, this is traditional oil, I used to fast dry white with some. But that's yeah, it's pretty much dry. Yeah, yeah.
It's not dirty.
No. Something like that. Do you think white will stay different everywhere?
This is interesting that you just use a rag all the time to clean your brush.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm brushing up with salt to clean, it's really.
Well, you can do, yeah, sometimes I do, but sometimes I just have if the colour isn't too different. Like if I was going to say, if it's reasonably similar, yeah, I can just wipe a bit off. Yeah, that's quicker, yeah.
Going from black to white or something, you would need to.
Yeah, that's what we would do, yeah. So I think when I was painting that yesterday, I tended to wash the little brushes, because I go from one detail to another detail.
Do you do that all in one day?
Yeah. Yeah, it needs a bit more like this building has got it.
Because it's a bit low.
Yeah, it is extremely low, this was a so we sort of went.
Yeah.
It looks like an instant chip or something, but there is one. Yep, do you want to do painting or drawing?
No, I'm going to
You'll stick with the drawing, yeah.
I've got put some charcoal.
Yeah, okay, great. Oh, yeah.
Another one,
Yeah, there's quite a few copies of that. There's multiple copies of quite a few of them. Yeah. Yeah, again, that was sort of this time of year, although it doesn't you know, like sort of, I think when I took these in the week, and it was sort of misty at the time, and that was just up there, felt like and it just reminded me of that, this was something real chamber, in about this time of year, about October time, but it's when you get that, you know, full dress in the morning, and you get the sun, it's really.
that makes it very hard to see.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that's well.
That's nice.
Is it?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's nice and big one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's nice to wake up like this.
It is, yeah. I found it really nice.
Do we just take one of these in a little bit, what colour?
Yeah.
I don't want to overdo it, like take everything.
No.
It's fine. We're not going home. There's nothing I can pitch up.
I've got brown, I've got here, I've got one colour, which I could do, but it's a bit greedy, I do want colour.
Yeah,
Try something
nice
different.
brush.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Have you written this all?
No, it's just feel useful. I've got one.
Oh,
So you
okay.
can just give me it back.
The only thing is
It's just easier to walk around. Yeah. I use
Also,
hiding out.
Yeah, can I help you?
Yeah. They were. Sorry. Can't remember if I stopped this.